Well, good afternoon, everybody, or evening or morning, wherever you happen to be. My name is Joshua Gardner, and on behalf of the ICA Pedagogy Committee, I would like to welcome you to today's Lunch and Learn. Today's topic is the bass clarinet, and joining us to talk about her work and to answer everybody's questions is none other than Dr. Sarah Watts. A little bit about Sarah. Sarah Watts is a British clarinetist and director of performance at the University of Sheffield. Sarah has published Spectral Immersions, a comprehensive guide to the theory and practice of bass clarinet multiphonics, and multiphonic miniatures for bass clarinet, which she's going to be talking about today, and released recordings for Clarinet Classics, Scimitar, Cool and Sound Music, and Hyperion Records. As a founding member of the Clara Quality Group, Sarah is passionate about equality and inclusivity in our field. She's the clarinetist in Hard Rain Soloist Ensemble of Northern Ireland and plays with a rare scale and ska. She's an Henri Selmer Paris artist, a Van Doren artist, a Silverstein Pro artist, and an associate of the Royal Academy of Music in London. If you want to read more about her, I will put in the chat her website, so you can check. I will do that here in a minute. I'm going to pass it on to Sarah, and she has a presentation for us, and we'll take some questions about that presentation, and then we have some questions. We'll be able to take questions from you all about bass clarinet. So, Sarah.
Fab. Thanks, Thor. Thanks for coming and joining in the session. It's great to see so many people. Yeah, it's early evening here, so 5 p.m. So it's late lunch, close to 1 o'clock, I think, because it's Saturday. Brilliant. So yeah, I was asked to do this session and was thinking, well, what do I talk about? Because I think the subject for me of low clarinets, which is my specialism, is like really vast. So I thought, well, actually, it would be nice to talk about my own research and also my fairly recent publication, Multiphonic Miniatures, and where the idea for that came from, how I went about doing it, and hopefully kind of inspire you all to play lots of multiphonics and graphic scores. So I'm going to attempt to share my presentation. Apologies for Eric Dolphy in the background. He wants to go out, but he doesn't really want to go out. So I'm going to share, hopefully, my keynote. And hopefully you can all see this. I'll press play as well. If ever you have any questions, pop them into chat. And maybe Josh, you can shout if it's during my presentation, if anyone wants to interfere, because I can't see, can't always see the questions pop up. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit about bass clarinet multiphonics. I think as well, a lot of what I say may well be relevant to clarinet, and that's something that I'm interested in exploring with regards to the multiphonic miniatures as well. But I'm going to tell you, oh, here we go. A little bit about the background to multiphonic miniatures and my research. So I did a doctorate in bass clarinet multiphonics. For me, they've been a technique that I loved using, but really problematic technique. Ever since I started specializing in bass back in around 2000, I'd always had multiphonics come up in pieces, but often the fingerings didn't work, or I didn't know fully how to play them, or I'd present a piece to my teacher, and my teacher would be like, oh, just use this one instead. And it really frustrated me because I feel that if composers want to use a multiphonic that's been notated in a particular guide, they really want that chord or that sound. Within their work. You know, they might have chosen it for harmonic reason or because it's got a particular sound or color or dynamic. So over, oh gosh, about 10 years, this really, really frustrated me more and more. And then I met some composers at the University of Kiel in the UK who were writing for me and getting equally frustrated when I was like, well, this one doesn't work, or this one sounds different to the notated version. And they said, well, why don't you come and do a PhD with us? So basically I did. And the result of that was Spectral Immersions, which is a comprehensive guide to the theory and practice of bass clarinet multiphonics. So this is basically my PhD thesis. And it was published just after I graduated back in 2015. It's published by Metropolis or Elri, and you can buy this now in PDF format. And I think there's hard copies still left or being sorted out for reprint. The book comes with fingerings and audio and charts as well that you can implement in Sibelius. So my aim was to create usable and accurate multiphonic charts. I think take all of this with a pinch of salt because multiphonics, as we know, can vary still. So I can have what I think is an accurate chart, but I'm not going to say that 100% of my multiphonics will work for 100% of players because with instrument design, instrument upgrades, room setting, reeds, mouthpieces, as there can be small little things. But on the whole, I hope that I've created usable and accurate charts. So the original book, Spectral Immersions, it writes about the theory behind type 1 and type 2 multiphonics. So just very quickly, type 1 is an overblown low note. So say if I play a super low C on the bass clarinet, manipulate my embouchure, I can get the harmonic series and that creates a type 1 multiphonic. A type 2 multiphonic will be a special fingering, a non-normal fingering. And if you vent certain keys that aren't within the fingering, basically it will create a multiphonic. So my book has 257 fully analysed and notated multiphonics that I called my SW charts. There's an example of this on the screen as well. Some of my multiphonics I have one played option, but you'll see, for example, SW255 has two played examples. If I manipulate my embouchure, I can get two different multiphonics on the same fingering. I can probably get 3 or 4 if I really want to try, but I wanted the guides to be usable. That's really important, the word usable. And alongside my book, I commissioned and wrote myself a set of new works using my charts. So these are also published by Metropolis, and we have many new pieces. I think they're still listed on my website as well. And they were great. I was able to work with composers on test charts and hopefully get a pretty good collection of works that have usable multiphonics in as well. But I think there's a big but. The one thing I have found over the years, even since I published my book, is I think my charts are usable. I know people are using them, people are composing with them, and I've got really good feedback. But I often find people don't know how to practice multiphonics. And a lot of people think, oh, here's the fingering, and I'm going to simply put that fingering on my instrument's blow, and a multiphonic is going to come out. And as we know, there's a lot more to it than that. So that doesn't always happen. There's a lot about voicing and just learning how they work. But there's really nothing out there in terms of etudes that can help us properly learn how to voice, play, and control multiphonics. And so even though I've got this book with all these fingerings, actually how useful is it, especially for people wanting to learn the technique? So in my head, ever since 2015, I've always thought about writing a set of etudes that can help people discover and become more competent with multiphonic production. And a couple of years ago, I was lucky enough to get some funding from the Arts Council England. which takes a bit of a minor miracle these days, and to research and compose some multiphonic miniatures. And so this was great. This kind of gave me the momentum to actually do the project. Um, and I decided I wanted to work with free-form notation or graphic score notation. I'll explain that with examples as we go on. And I chose this to write my 24 short etudes because I think that you need time and space to play multiphonics. By the way, you can disagree or agree with anything I say, that's fine, and it'll start up a nice discussion later as well. But for example, if I want to play a multiphonic in just a whole beat and I've got no space to make it sound, I just have to have it like 1, 2, 3, bam, there you go. Chances are it's not going to work, especially for people who are less confident with multiphonics. They just need time to sound and time to evolve. So by using freeform graphic score and also improvisation within these works, it gives the player time to learn how to form and play each multiphonic within the piece. So for me, this type of notation was central to the project. I also think it's fun as well. And that was another thing. These etudes, they had to be fun because we don't have enough fun in life, do we? So I wanted them to be attractive to people to want to come to. Also, I think improvisation is really important, and just to learn, as well as multiphonics, how to improvise, how to read non-notated or traditionally notated music is a really important skill for us, you know, especially the music industry is constantly changing. So this is just good practice for us as players. So in short, the aim of the project was to create practice material and short concert works, because you can put these in concerts, that help the performer to become confident in multiphonic production. And the improvisatory nature of graphic score, as I just said, is an important skill for a 21st century musician. So that's the concept behind all of the pieces. So this was published in December 2023. We just released it in time for the last European Clarinet conference in Tilburg. And it's published by Auri. Thank you to Matt Johnston, who was just incredible with helping me with this project and helping me format the book. And it's available in PDF download or hard copy. So I think Josh has the link and he'll pop that in chat for you all. And as I said, it's just a huge thank you to Arts Council England for funding it, because it really gave me time to be able to do it. So there's 24 etudes and they are split into 3 parts. And I felt that was important to try and kind of separate them and not just have 24 like random studies out there. So I'm going to take you through the 3 parts and show you some examples. Josh, shout if there's any questions, go in the chat, and please feel free to interrupt me at any point. So part 1, I wanted this really to be around free-form notation. So this is basically where I've taken away bar lines and any sense of counting and rhythm. And I've done this because it allows the player to play each multiphonic with freedom, time, and also space. I think that's really important. So there's no rhythmic demands in these pieces. Each work explores as well different technical aspects that might be useful if you're playing. So for example, I use microtones, extremes of register, color trills. So I wanted these to have different other extended techniques that might be useful for players. Musical decisions are left to the player. I think that's really important. I don't want every player to sound like me. I want each performance of each piece to be individual. Um, so you can make your interpretation of these pieces your own, which I think, again, is a lot of fun. It means you can break the rules I make, not that there are any rules, or you can bring your own decisions in. So I'm going to give you an example of one of these, which is actually the first one. And this one I called Chrome. A little bit of a play on words of the word chromatic, but I like the word chrome. And this one features chromatic low notes because that's something on bass clarinet that we never practice enough. So I wanted just to have some basic low note chromatics and also just to go into a little bit of altissimo. I've not gone too high, but just to give players an ease into maybe practicing some high notes as well. Each piece as well, by the way, has a page of instructions with them and also the proper breakdown of the multiphonic in question. But this one you'll see just has a multiphonic based on a C sharp fingering, and you take the register key off and a really nice, fairly simple multiphonic will pop out, hopefully. So so I just wanted this one to be quite a simple one to start with. You can play it slow and spacious. You can take your time with notes, and this one really is a chance to focus on sound. There's also a wee bit of improvisation towards the bottom where you can take bits of fragments in any order and just do a basic bit of improvisation, which I think is quite terrifying for some players. So I wanted to get that in early. And each piece is supposed to last about 3 minutes max, give or take a little bit. Hopefully that's clear. If there's any questions, just jump in. If not, I will keep talking. So part one is 6 pieces that are around this type of notation. I cover little techniques like bis bibliando. There's one that has microtones in. Another thing, I want players to be independent with research where they can. So for the microtones, I've not listed fingers because we have very good charts out there, such as Jason Alder's microtone charts. So I've simply directed players to Jason's charts so people can find their own multiphonic fingerings. For altissimo fingerings, I've got a free guide on my website. Because one thing that really grates me with my students is when they're like, what's the fingering for this microtone? And they expect me to hand everything on a plate. And that's fine while you're a student, but once you graduate, you need to learn to be independent. So, and there's plenty of resources out there. So I didn't want to give everything on a plate in this guide. So I give you the multiphonic fingerings, but that's it. So then we have part 2, which is the next 6 pieces. And these become a little bit more instructional, and some of them have like a game element as well. This is where I want to have a little bit of fun. So some of it is free form, and some of it I start to introduce graphic notation. These are aimed to take players outside their comfort zones as well. So you might look at it and be like, well, what am I going to do with that? But that's, I think, an important thing for you just to discover what you're going to do with that. You have to practice graphic scores as well, and you have to practice, you know, just going with whatever you see on the page. I think as musicians, it's important for us to get out of having regular notated dots in front of us all the time. So this is also where I encourage own interpretation and own exploration as improvisation. When you're playing these pieces, there's no such thing as being wrong. I think that's an important thing to say as well. And every time you play it, it might have something different in it. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of part 2. So these are 2 pieces within part two. Again, they come with instructions. So you have a page of instructions, and one of my pieces later, sorry, there's 4 parts. I can't do my maths. So this is part two of part four. So they come with a page of instructions, and I'll show you a sample of those pages and then part four. So let me just talk through box 3. So the idea is that you rotate your little fragments between the boxed in bits in the yellow boxes. And then you've got the graphics in the middle with numbers, lines, dots. And so basically you have to play what you see or what springs to mind within the boxes. You'll see some of the improvisations have microtones. You can use any octave as well for the box at the top and the box at the bottom. And then you'll see the boxes to the left and the right have multiphonics in the fingerings, which I give you in the instructions. The lines, the numbers, the dots, it's up to you what you do with them. It could be short staccatos, it could be glissandos. You might make a little melody. What might you do with the number 9? You might play a note 9 times. You might play it for 9 counts, whatever a count is. So it's completely up to you how you play it. And then you rotate between the boxes and the graphics, basically as many times as you want. It should be around 3 minutes, but if you want to do it for 10 minutes and you're enjoying it, feel free. So, so a very kind of flexible piece there. And then Rocket 147. Oh, I love doing this one. This is one of my favorite ones, I think. I'm a big snooker fan. I know, like in America, snooker's quite rare. You have pool instead. But if you don't know snooker, you need to discover it. It's a great game. And I work in Sheffield, and that's the home of the Snooker World Championships. And my favourite player is Ronnie O'Sullivan, who's nicknamed Rocket Ronnie. And the maximum score in snooker you can get is 147. And so this piece is based on the fastest ever break of a 147 by Ronnie O'Sullivan. And the history of that is in my notes. And you can see the balls right at the bottom, and that's the order of play for a 147. So the black ball is my multiphonic SW147. So you have to learn to play that one quite a lot in this piece. And then you can pick whichever multiphonic you want for the red ball, the yellow ball, the green ball, the brown ball, the blue and the pink balls. And then the idea is that you have to play a whole clearance of snooker in order. And you have to take into account, the sound that the cue makes when it hits the white ball and how the white ball travels to the coloured ball and how it slams into the pocket. So that was the idea for that one, to have some games alongside it. I've not completed Rocket 147 yet because I keep losing count of where I am. So I'm still practicing that one. But one day I'll do it in concert. But again, it's a great one for just getting lots of different multiphonics to sound. Any questions, or shall I keep going? Keep going.
We do have one question.
Yeah, go for it, Josh.
Popped up. This is from Raquel. Hi, Sarah. I know these pieces are meant to be for bass clarinet, which in my opinion is way more versatile for this kind of technique. But do you think this could work for soprano clarinet?
Yes, and that's my next project. So I've loosely started transcribing most of them for clarinet. Some won't work, and I may well pull in new pieces. But the ones that will transcribe, I want to transcribe, and I want to publish a clarinet collection. So these ones won't, because obviously a lot of fingerings won't transfer. But I think they're going to be okay to transcribe. So bear with me, because I haven't got funding for the clarinet one, so it'll take a bit more time. But I'm really keen to do a clarinet version. Great. I will keep going. So part three, these were inspired by the Hebridean island of Raasay, which is where I'm part based and have a little cottage that overlooks the mountains. And I've been really inspired by folk music within my own writing. And I really wanted to use the landscape and folk culture within the pieces as well. So there's 6 pieces based on the Isle of Raasay. 2 of these actually feature dyad multiphonics, which aren't in spectral immersions, but have crept up in several pieces that I've played. Dyad are really close multiphonics, close interval, and they're actually really tricky to play because you have to be really relaxed and really voice right. So I thought it would be good to feature dyad multiphonics at somewhere. So here's an example of a piece that has dyad multiphonics in. This piece is called Har. Har is a low-lying fog that comes down, and often you can just see the top of the mountains, which is the green dots. And then obviously you can see the sea, which is the blue wiggles. And the only other thing you can hear in the Har is the foghorns from ships, because it's a really thick fog. So if there's ships or boats passing the island, then you often just hear the foghorn. So that's my low notes. I put the dyad fingerings in my explanations as well. So I've just popped them there so that you can see some examples of dyads. And this one becomes more graphic score-like. So what are you going to do to make the fog noise? What are you going to do with the green? What are you going to do with the blue? That's completely up to you. How much foghorn are you going to have? And how much of the multiphonics are you going to do? So that was the use of dyad multiphonics. And then I wanted to use folk music as an influence as well. The Kulin Mountains really inspired me. And so a couple of them have influences from the mountains and also influence of folk modes as well. And this one also has a drone. So you can download a bagpipe in drone act to use as an accompaniment for this. And this uses type 1 multiphonics at overblown low notes, which fit really nicely with the drone. Is that another question just popped in?
Yes, we have a question from Marianne. Are the fingerings for a Buffet or Selmer or other brands of bass clarinet?
They should work. I did test them when I did my initial project. So they should work. I always have that with a little bit of caution because every time there's an upgrade to a bass clarinet, it's going to throw a key somewhere. But on the whole, they should mostly work. And if you find one that's stubborn, there's enough within my book for you to find something that's very, very close.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, yes, but there's always a little tiny book or be but or there's a be flexible.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
And I
Yeah.
just to add to that, I've found that like from brand to brand, even model to model, the pitch can vary slightly or more than slightly.
Yeah. That's one reason why I didn't go into 8-tone fingerings as well when I was doing it. So you'll see I've just used basically for the main multiphonic up and down arrows because it was pretty impossible to put multiphonics into 8 tones. It's like so many of them fall in the middle, or you might get a little bit sharp while you're playing. So I was like, just keep it approximate, and that seems to have worked well. Great, let me whiz through part 4 then. And so this is where I really went into graphic score notation. As I go through, it increases the amount of freedom to interpret via the use of pictures. And there's some instructions, but mostly decisions now, other than multiphonic guidance, are left to the performer. So I had really good fun with these. So I want to give you an example of one of my favorites, not one of my favorites. You've all heard Eric Dolphy, who has now realised that he's not getting his own way and being let out. So Eric Dolphy is my cat. But Eric Dolphy, I think, is also one of the most important bass clarinet players in our history. So I wanted to involve both Eric Dolphys in a piece. My Eric Dolphy likes going out to lunch to catch mice, and the Eric Dolphy wrote Out to Lunch. So the fragment at the top is basically the head of Out to Lunch. The multiphonics loosely fall in with the harmonies. I say loosely because they're full of microtones, and I got some meows in there. So I have left both Eric Dolphys in a piece of music, and this one's great fun to play. You can play the fragments in any order. You can play the fragments complete. You can split them up, and then you can just take inspiration from lots of pictures of my Eric Dolphy. And again, this is just an example of the fact that I wanted these to be fun. There's one on elephants. There's one on Dracula, because I scored an improvised graphic score, free notation play that I did with my actor colleague based on Dracula. We called it Dracula Bite Size. So some of the fragments I used, I put within a Dracula improvisation. And then the very final one in my book is Clara Quality. And I did this because I think it matters. And I wanted to highlight the work we've been doing, but I wanted this to be a completely free one. So this is number 24, and basically you can pick whichever multiphonics you want to finish the piece, and you can make of it whatever you want to. My advice is to choose a sample of every type of multiphonic you can. Use low notes, use high notes, and be as inclusive of multiphonics as possible. So that's a little bit about my book and why I did it. So as I said earlier, it's available in print or PDF form from Owry. There's 24 pieces in solo. Sorry, there's 24 pieces within the book. So yeah, what's next? So I've already said that I really want to make these into clarinet ones. And I hope there would be a little bit of interest in that. And I've also kind of developed my work within graphic score as well. It's something that I really enjoy working with. So I actually did a piece for graphic score in Canada last year for multiple bass clarinets, and that was fun. And I've just done my first contra bass clarinet graphic score, that was a project I did in Sheffield with an old listed building that's being converted into a new music centre. So I wanted to do a graphic score based on that. So I think my work within graphic scores and miniatures and etudes will continue. So that's basically my presentation.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. We've had a few questions come in specifically about your work with the miniatures. Like to open the floor now for any other questions. We have some prepared questions as well. So if anybody has any questions, please go ahead and type them in the chat, and we will get to it. I have a question. It's not on the list.
Go on, fire it at me, Josh.
Yeah, sorry. You talk a lot about like the importance of the experience with graphic scores and learning how to interpret and creating your own thing. Could you talk a little bit about what benefits we get as players when we explore multiphonics as opposed to maybe not exploring them? That's a big topic, but
okay, they're not just an extended technique, and that's what they were for me when I started my PhD. But within a month of me starting my PhD, I realized I knew nothing about clarinet or bass clarinet playing. I knew nothing about the physics. I knew nothing about how it worked. And so for me, it helped me understand everything there is to know about my instrument and making a good sound. Um, so I think the first thing was with type ones, I suddenly understood the physics of the instrument and how the harmonic series is so central to the build-up of the instrument. That was, yeah, that kind of confused me a lot at first, but then it slowly started to make a lot of sense. And from that, then going into actually playing type ones and voicing multiphonics, it taught me a lot about voicing. And also, that was the moment that I became aware of what's going off inside my mouth. So, tongue position, relaxation, tension, where I pitch each multiphonic to make the best sound. So, suddenly I became very aware of not just blowing this piece of wood, putting my fingers down and making a note. I suddenly realized how I made a note. More importantly, I then went back, this was all on bass clarinet, to clarinet. I was like, oh my God, like I can play the clarinet better now. I think it really helped my sound. And now I can go and play classical rep and I feel like I know what I'm doing, if that makes sense. So for me, extended techniques has been a gateway to improving my own playing, but also understanding the instrument. Um, I think it also helped me realize that actually I'm a singer when I play. I'm not a clarinet player when I play. So that's the main benefit, I think, from doing extended techniques. They're not just funny noises that appear in pieces of music. There's a reason we should learn them.
I love that you use the term gateway because I feel like these pieces are very much a gateway into these techniques and exploring what is happening inside in order to get these things to work, because
Yeah,
anybody who's playing multiphonics knows very well that the fingering alone is not going to get you the results you want all the time.
yeah, and also how often do we as players actually practice extended techniques? It's like pretty much never. They appear in a piece of music and we curse a little bit at them and we maybe manage to play some of them. And but for a lot of players, extended techniques are difficult and they're inaccessible a lot of the time. And even when we become quite familiar with them, unless you're a real specialist contemporary player and that's all you do, they're difficult to play. And I think we should treat extended techniques as we do our warm-ups and our studies. They should become a part of our practice. And actually, we can get to a stage where they're actually fun to play. And, I've done multiphonics on courses with adult enthusiasts, and it's like the joy in the room when everybody can play a multiphonic is brilliant. So I do think they're important techniques to build into your general practice.
Yeah, take the extended out of it and they just be part
Yes.
of our technique.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so do you have a favorite miniature?
Oh, it changes all the time. I do love Eric Dolphy because it makes people smile. So I had fun with that one. I love the Rase ones as well. I put drone with some of them. And one of them has a Scottish folk song built into it, and they're really good to play. So yeah,
I can attest that one is quite beautiful.
yeah. I think using like apps and drones as well is a really good way of getting people interested as well. And they're both good concert pieces as well. I wanted the pieces to be optional because there's nothing worse than just having an etude book that sticks on your stand. So I wanted them to be nice concert fillers or, something that could be used as an exam piece for students. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can play them. And it's great doing them in concert as well when you can display them on an overhead screen and have the audience see what you're doing. And I think that's accessible for the audience as well. The feedback from audiences is like often been smiles and laughs as well when they see kind of how you're interpreting.
So your inspiration for these are incredibly varied and diverse. Like, what led to that initial um, idea of collecting these and composing them in this particular way?
Think it's just goes back to work that I've done with graphic scores. I've always used graphic scores in my work, be it with education, with kids composing for me. Or I use graphic scores a lot with my flute player in rare scale. And we did a lot of online live performances over the pandemic using graphic scores. And I just really love it. I teach a module on graphic scores at uni. And it's just a really nice way of getting people outside their comfort zones, but still getting people to produce music.
Well, if it's okay with you, we could maybe transition to some more like general bass clarinet questions. Um, we do have a quick compositional question in the chat from Marianne. Which composition software is best for multiphonic notation? That's interesting timing of that, considering what's been happening in the software.
Oh, yeah. So I did all of mine with Sibelius and just built them up. So my book actually comes with a data package where you can pull off the graphics and incorporate them as image files as well. So once you've built up your multiphonic for the fingerings, you can grab my graphic.
Yeah, very, very cool indeed. I'm sure you're fortunate to have been using Sibelius.
Yes.
So and again, anybody who's here, feel free to add a question in the chat as we go through some of these. Do you have any advice for someone without much experience with bass clarinet who wants to get more involved with the instrument?
Oh yeah, just do it. I think just jump in. Yeah, I think I was thinking about this, like you've obviously given me questions and some of them overlap. And I'll probably repeat. It's not a big clarinet, it's a bass clarinet. So there's gonna be things that are different. For me, setup is always key. So if you're jumping into bass clarinet for the first time, don't use an old mouthpiece because it's the one that came with it. If you know that you're going to stick with a bass clarinet, invest in a decent mouthpiece. I think that's going to help you more than anything. Most of the problems I see with people that are new to the bass is down to mouthpiece. So setup's key. Embouche is key as well. It's much looser and much more relaxed than clarinet. So it's important, I think, if you can, for you to get a lesson with a specialist. That is the one thing I would advise, just a lesson to get you started with the basics. Again, a lot of problems I see with people coming to me for lessons are they're using clarinet embouchure and then they squeak a lot because they're too tense. So yeah, advice, it's a big clarinet. It's not a big clarinet, it's a bass clarinet. Try and get a lesson. We're really lucky now with online. It's pretty easy to access lessons and just check your setup.
Well, speaking of setup, we have a question in the chat from Bill. Do you find that you are adjusting your reed mouthpiece setup as you explore multiphonics? I play a relatively close, stiffer reed, and have always found multiphonics a little difficult.
Yeah, I think I'd probably go for a slightly more flexible reed, slightly more open reed. So yeah, I think, but generally, if I've got a close or a stuffy or stiff reed, I can't get the sound I want anyway. So I want my life to be easy. I don't have enough time to practice as it is. So
Well,
yeah.
that was going to be my next question about reeds. Do you find you tend to play a softer or harder reed than on soprano, or what do you tend to see with students who come in when they first start playing bass?
Yeah, so my reed strength is pretty much the same as clarinet, with one difference. On clarinet, I play 3.5. With bass, I have a box of three and a box of 3.5. And I tend to rotate between them and get the ones that work best. I'd probably go for a slightly harder 3 and a slightly softer 3.5. So it makes sense to have a mix of both boxes. I play Van Doren reeds, and I often have a mix of silver box and V21s as well. So again, I just swap between those two makes of reeds. Basically, I want to get to any venue and have a reed that works, and I find that's my best way. I tend to rotate reeds, around 6 at a time I'll have in a box, sometimes a wee bit more. And I find, like, by doing that way and having a good rotation, normally wherever I go, I've got something in the box that's going to work. So I don't tend to adjust beyond that. Mouthpiece, I just use a B50. I used to play Crystal, and then I dropped it and couldn't find a matched one. And Van Doren had been shouting at me for ages saying try else. And then I did try the B50 and it worked really well. So I've stuck with it. So I've tried other mouthpieces. I think there are other really fantastic mouthpieces out there, but the B50 works for me. I know that if I drop it tomorrow, I can go to the store and get another B50 that's going to play the same. I don't adjust reeds. I'm useless at DIY, and I tend to destroy anything that I try to touch in any way with DIY. Also, I don't have time. I work full time pretty much at Sheffield. I have gigs. I'm probably going to shock people, especially students now, but you learn how to play an instrument at university, and then you survive for the rest of your career. So I may get 3 days a week to practice, but 4 days a week where I'm commuting 4 hours a day and at uni. So when I sit down with my instrument, I need to know that I've got gear there that I can play, and I don't want to be spending an hour scraping reeds. And I think it's important to be honest about that, because a lot of people are like, oh, how do you scrape a reed? And I'm like, don't ask me, because I destroy reeds.
I find that I tend to be I'm on that same boat. Uh, just it's a time thing. But speaking of reliable equipment, the the bass clarinets and the lower clarinets do tend to there's a lot more keywork.
Yeah.
Are there some common problems you see with bass clarinets? Common strategies for dealing with those issues?
And yeah, learn how to put it together properly. Um, Again, my students come, or I've seen college instruments, and you're like, my gosh, what have you done with this instrument? But I very rarely have anything go wrong. That said, I'll probably go back to it now, nothing will work. But it's very, very rare an instrument will go wrong if you look after it. Occasionally a pad might move in different weather types, or you might be unlucky enough to get a crack, or something might go slightly out of a line. But generally, if you look after your instruments, they're gonna hold. Um, and the biggest issue with contra and bass clarinet is putting those two big joints together. So when you're in a shop for the first time, or you're with a teacher for the first time, just make sure that you get a lesson on how to put it together so you're not ripping corks off or twisting keywork. And
Do you have any suggestions for like an order of assembly? I know from from personal experience, I always like putting the mouthpiece on the neck first, because
yeah,
I want to be balancing the rest of the instrument when I'm doing that. But do you have any tips?
yeah. So I always, I've got really little hands and I'm not very strong. So it's probably the way that suits me best. So I always put the bell on first, bell onto the bottom joint. And then I put the bottom joint and the top joint together. And then I put the mouthpiece onto the crook, and then the crook onto the base. And that seems to work best for me. So, oh, sorry, my phone is going and I'm just going to stop it quickly. Great.
Definitely makes a difference, especially for younger students when they're,
Yes.
manipulating this fairly large instrument.
Yeah.
Um, do you, I mean, an incredibly accomplished bass and contra player. Do you have Any thoughts to share about the differences between bass and contra specifically, the lowest of the instruments?
Yeah, for me, the lower the instrument, the more relaxed you have to be, especially with embouchure. Um, so yeah, when I first got my Beast back a few years ago, oh my gosh, you should have heard the racket I made from it because I was trying to play it a wee bit too much like bass clarinet, and I had to totally relax off. So there's very little to no bite anyway on bass clarinet. You're very relaxed. But there is no bite or squeeze at all with contra. So just really open. Um, and I think for me, that's the biggest thing. The lower the instrument, the more relaxed you have to be. And again, that goes back to getting, a lesson with a specialist, because clarinet embouchure is so different to bass embouchure.
Yeah, indeed. Uh,
Mhm.
let's see, we have one more prepared question here. Um, the clarion and altissimo registers seem to be troublesome for players coming from B flat clarinet. Do you have any strategies to tackle this?
Yeah, I think again it goes back to my very first comment that the clarinet is not a bass clarinet, they're separate instruments. And so actually to use, for example, clarinet fingerings in high notes on bass just doesn't work. And at some point someone decided that, oh yeah, you can play a top D like a clarinet, but you can half hole it and you can go up the high notes like that. But actually, they're not good fingerings to use. Um, they're very stuffy and they're quite difficult to get. So for altissimo fingerings, you really need to play. I'm going to do this bass clarinet fingerings. But what are bass clarinet fingerings? I mean, it's just fingerings that we've worked out work better over the years, basically. I don't think anybody ever sat down and said, this is a bass fingering. But then is that also a case for clarinet? We've kind of over the years evolved to this way of thinking this is the fingering you use. But even in altissimo and clarinet, my students use different fingerings when they come from different teachers. So we're always, even on clarinet, tweaking. Um, and so for bass clarinet, there might be 3 or 4 fingerings for each top note. And I think there's some that have kind of homogenized over the years. So we've got our open fingerings. So a high D is an overblown G, a high E is an overblown A. And we've got a set of long fingerings as well that work. I actually have a free guide on my website that is a start point. And there's other guides out there as well. Um, so I think it's getting away from standard clarinet fingerings because they won't work or they won't work well. And that really, I think, opens up possibilities on bass clarinet. And again, it's the bite as well. If you bite too much on bass with any note, you kind of a little bit screwed, really. So it's always staying relaxed, voicing as well. Can you pitch it in your head? Can you sing it? Then can you play it? I think multiphonics helps as well because when you play a multiphonic, like you don't just like grab the chord, you actually have to pitch the top note. You have to hear it in your head and you have to learn where that note is in order for the low note to come out. So a lot of it comes down to pitching. I think we're a lot like a brass player. Brass players like this and can get many harmonics. We're the same on any instrument. If I play a low E on a clarinet and squeak it, it's not a squeak, it's a harmonic. Just think about the harmonics as the instruments get bigger, they get wider. So I think all of these little things kind of all add together and all help our control.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you had any strategies for learning how to voice those open altissimo fingerings because I know that can be a challenge when you first try to play an open high D and it comes out as an open G. But yeah, you hit exactly where I was going with that with the multiphonics because you're right. You have to hear it very much like a brass player and learn where that configuration, what it feels like create that. Do you have any other strategies that you like to use for working on, especially the open fingering voicing, where you things have to be in place, otherwise they don't
They're
work?
not going to come out. Yeah, practice and patience. I think like patience is the one thing we don't have, especially as we get older. But it's so important, practice and patience. But yeah, there's an easy way around, especially voicing the G one. So we can use our register key only. So we're fingering an open G, register key only. It's very slightly sharp, but it'll get that note speaking. So you can press the register key only and you'll get a slightly sharp high D. Then take the register key off, keeping the air going, and you'll figure out where it is. Once you've got that going, just experiment with your tongue position and see where it drops back down to the G. Because at some point, if your tongue position's not in the right place, it'll just drop down to the G. I think when you're really happy doing that and you've kind of got it quite solid, then the next trick is to go from an open G, probably to the register finger D, and just ba, 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 ba. And eventually you'll just be able to overblow G to D, G to D. So it's a process, I think. It took me a while when I first started doing those fingerings to make them work well.
I love the comment about experimentation. Just
Totally.
yeah, be okay with whatever comes out.
Yeah, and just remember, we've all got different mouths, we've all got different shaped teeth, we've all got different shape and size tongues. Like none of us are the same as anybody else. So one rule isn't going to precisely fit all. So we got to figure out where works best for us as well. And I think that's probably where the patience comes in.
Of course. Well, we are nearing the end of our session. I'd like to just throw out one more call for any questions, bass clarinet related, or other. If anybody has any questions, feel free to either unmute or put it in the chat.
Everyone wants lunch.
So I think this is gonna wrap it up. Sarah, thank you so much for doing this, and thank everybody who's here for coming, and being part of this with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a really interesting session, and thank you for all the questions because they make me think, which is good for me. So it's been great, and hope some of you enjoy the miniatures as well.
They are terrific.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun to do.
Well, thank you all.
Brilliant. Thank you all, and have a good weekend as well.